Morning.
Good morning. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. I think we should start the webinar. Those who had joined earlier already got some glimpses of how we were preparing ourselves for today's webinar. But yeah, so welcome everybody. This webinar is dedicated to finding out more about permitting procedures of renewable energy projects in the Baltic states, so in Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. And well, those who don't know me, my name is Lasma. I'm the Executive Director of the Latvian Wind Energy Association. And here with me are the representative from the European Commission, DG Energy, Vera Kisler. I hope I said it right. We've got representatives from the Eclairion consultancy firm, Jurga and Edith, and my lovely colleagues from the other associations, so the Estonian and Lithuanian wind power associations. So Ted et al, wave at everybody, and then Linas as well. And yeah, the idea is that we will dive more in the details of the project findings, and this is the RES Simplify project. And Vera and Jurga will tell you more about it in a second. But before we do that, I'd like to give floor to the representatives of the three associations to just briefly say welcome words. Yeah, let's start by Gatis Galvin, who's the chair of the supervisory board, followed by Terje, and then followed by Linas. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Lasma, for introduction, and big thank for all the wind society in Europe that finally has started to think about how to make life easier. And it's also funny to find your name, but that you have been interviewed in 2019, and you don't recollect what was the problem then. So that way, thank you for finally reminding me what happened then, and of course, lots of has changed, and hopefully this will be the starting point when we act more active to solve these problems as the local wind development in each country is struggling with, and we can help to solve them together. So thank you.
So, good morning from my side. I'm Terje Talv from Estonia Wind Power Association. Tere hommikust. We already learned how to say tere hommikust in other language, so labrit. And I want to actually thank Lasma for doing the most job in this webinar. I think it's really needed, and we all three countries are facing the similar problems with permitting and how to build up actual wind parks. So the cooperation and the understanding what is going on is really important, and the solutions are really needed right now. I think there are several different ways how European Commission is handling this problem, but all the solutions that will get us closer to the actual wind parks are more than welcome. And so thank you, and thank you all presenters. Thank you.
So from my point and from my side, big thank you for everyone who joined. I will be not so pleasant. I will say that this setup, what we see in Europe, big step for politicians, but sometimes step back for developers. So let's try to avoid this situation and well, move forward to building wind farms, not just in the papers, but in real life.
Thank you all for the welcome words, and I'd like to give floor to Vera Kisler from the DG Energy at the European Commission.
Yes, good morning from Brussels, sunny Brussels today. It's my pleasure to say a few words of introduction on what the European Commission is doing right now to accelerate the permit granting procedures for renewable energy projects. It's, I must say, quite a comprehensive set of actions that we have taken, and this is still ongoing, of course, in cooperation with the member states. Why are we doing this? Of course, because the lengthy administrative procedures are one of the key hurdles for quicker deployment of renewables. It can take up to 10 years in the wind sector, up to 4 or 5 years in the solar sector. And this has a serious impact on project developers as well, and investors, of course, but mainly on our objectives to reach climate neutrality in 2050, which is enshrined in the European climate law. And now with Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, this has even turned into a strategic priority for the EU to cut our dependence on primarily imported fossil fuels, so our efforts are even more needed. And renewables are now the cheapest source of energy in many parts of Europe, and really have to take action to accelerate the deployment much more. In the Renewables Directive, we already have provisions to streamline and accelerate the permitting for renewables. You probably know that there's a deadline of 2 years and an obligation for member states to have a one-stop shop for project developers. But we see that it's quite difficult for member states to implement these requirements, and they ask for guidance, and that's why we launched the study Resimplify in 2019. It's good to see that some of you have participated in the fieldwork to analyze all the barriers in detail and also good practices. Of course, we were mainly looking for good practices to spread across Europe. And based on this, we came out with a package in May last year as part of the Repower EU plan, composed of a Commission recommendation to member states what to do to speed up permit granting procedures. This was accompanied with a guidance where we listed those good practices which we found in the study. A legislative proposal as well, so to revise the Renewable Energy Directive. One of the new concepts that we proposed is the introduction of so-called go-to areas on land and sea, where member states would designate areas which are particularly suitable, where environmental impacts are expected to be low, and therefore the permit granting procedures can be even quicker. And in addition, in November last year, we proposed an emergency regulation. It was adopted very swiftly by the Council in December and is now in force for 18 months. This emergency regulation introduces faster permitting processes for certain types of projects, mainly those which can be rolled out very quickly and have the least impact on the environment. So solar energy equipment, repowering of existing power plants, and deployment of heat pumps. And it also introduces the presumption of overriding public interest. So when balancing legal interests for certain projects, this can help to give a bit more weight to the renewables deployment. All of these measures share the same goal to simplify and speed up the permit granting procedures, also including the grid connection processes, and to improve the spatial planning. And citizen and community participation, of course, is cross-cutting issue of high importance to ensure that this development is done in hand with the citizens and accepted. And with this, I think I will hand back to you, Lasma.
Thank you, Vera. Insightful. And now we move on to Jurga, who will present well, the process itself as it was and the results and recommendations. Let's see if screen sharing works now.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jurga. I'm Senior Project Manager for Clarion, a consultancy based in Berlin. I hope you can see my screen now. Yes? Okay,
yes,
great.
We can.
Like Vera already said, in 2019, we started this project called Resimplify, and we analyzed the permitting granting procedures and grid connection procedures in EU member states and 2 additional countries, Iceland and Norway. And as you know, that the project started 2019, and we did our research already around 2020. So some of the results we will present today, especially on the barriers, will most probably be to some extent already outdated, because as you know, in the last year, countries did so much, because of this crisis, current crisis. And there were lots of amendments in the countries, which is nice, concerning renewable energy sources. So take this presentation today as an inspiration for further discussions at the end of our presentation, because the project is still not over. These results will be extended with the input we receive through dissemination activities, such like today, an event for the Baltic states. We have these events also in other countries, and so the idea of today's meeting with you is to collect further input from you on possibilities how to improve the procedures further for renewable energy sources. In this case, I know we are like more representatives from wind energy sector, so in this case for wind energy. So very welcome at the end of my presentation to hear more about your suggestions, because by the end of April, we will draft the final report for the Commission, and we will suggest further policy recommendations how to improve procedures at EU level and member state level. So your discussions, thoughts, ideas are really very welcome. So I will start now. The mission of this project was to improve administrative and grid connection procedures, as Vera said, for renewable energy installations in all EU member states. And this achievement was based on research and analysis and benchmarking, sorry, it's still early in the morning, benchmarking of status quo, identification of best practice and policy recommendations, and dissemination of communication of results, which happens also today during our webinar. So when we conducted the research and analysis of our administrative procedures and grid connection procedures in all EU member states, plus Iceland and Norway, we identified during the research approximately 400 barriers for renewable energy projects, and also identified 50 good practices. And as a result of this research and analysis task, we drafted 29 national reports, which describe administrative procedures for renewable energy sources and barriers and good practices on a country level. So these reports are published, and maybe you already saw them. Here is the table which shows for which technologies per country we analyzed administrative procedures, barriers, and good practices. So you see that, for example, for Estonia, these technologies included wind onshore and offshore. Onshore, PV ground-mounted and rooftop, and biomass. I think the same technologies were covered also in the research for Lithuania, and for Latvia it included onshore wind, PV rooftop, and biomass. So today I will discuss more on the results for wind onshore. Less about other technologies, but our focus was also more on wind and PV technologies and less on biomass, for example, also in our report. So here is we call this traffic light assessment table, which demonstrates which process steps are most complicated for onshore wind projects in the European countries. So you see which process steps we analyzed during our project. So we analyzed site selection, electricity production license, application preparation process, administrative authorization, grid connection, corporate legal fiscal, and some other steps which might be different per country. So here it is obvious that the most problematic process steps for onshore wind projects in EU countries are site selection, but the most problematic one is administrative authorization process step, but also grid connection process step. So here, for example, if I look at our results for the 3 countries participating in the webinar today, for example, in Lithuania, the onshore wind projects face moderate barriers in site selection, which is related to limitation for wind projects. So I will be really interested in finding from you if this has changed for the last year, you know, since we conducted our research. Maybe the situation is different, but our results demonstrated at the time when we did the research that the site selection is problematic in Lithuania due to the limitation of projects near surveillance radars, and also projects are limited by sanitary protection zones. But also administrative authorization procedure is hindered by unclear reasoning for refusal to change purpose of land, or, for example, a long and costly spatial planning and long and unreasoned environmental impact assessment procedure for repowering projects. In Estonia, our results demonstrated that there are moderate barriers in site selection procedure. And this is mainly due to large to the fact that large share of locations cannot be used due to national security reasons. So similar like in Lithuania, this is mainly because of the conflict with military interests and national security issues. Also, grid connection is faced by moderate barriers in Estonia, and it was communicated by the stakeholders we interviewed that it's because the grid capacity and grid connection cost is quite unclear in many situations, that the grid connection process is non-transparent, and that the huge problem is that the grid connection costs have to be borne by the project developers. And also one problem is the so-called phantom grid connection, that some projects reserve the capacity, grid capacity, but then do not implement the projects, and the capacity is blocked for new projects. With regard to administrative authorization in Estonia, the project developers communicated severe barriers here, mainly due to not in my municipality or not in my backyard effect, and also wide complaint procedures, mainly that everyone, as we heard, can complain about the projects, not only those living in the vicinity of the project. And in Latvia, as you can see, there is a purple color in site selection, which means that there are severe barriers. And it was communicated that municipalities in Latvia were like preventing zoning of wind projects, and therefore the complete project was blocked already in this process step and couldn't be completed. So I think we have nobody from solar sector, right, Lasma?
We
today?
do a couple of
okay.
members of ours who are also both in wind and solar. Yeah.
Okay, so here then the table also for ground-mounted PV. You see that the situation is a little bit better for ground-mounted PV compared to onshore wind projects, but still we have many process steps, or not many, but many countries with process steps colored in red. And administrative authorization process step is also here the most problematic one, followed by grid connection process, and site selection is less problematic for solar power. But still, I think increasingly there are some conflicts in site selection process step between PV, ground-mounted PV especially, and also, for example, agricultural land or some other land uses. So in Lithuania, for example, you see that only minor barriers have been detected in our research for site selection and grid connection. And this is mainly because PV systems in Lithuania up to 30 kilowatt, maybe changed, but back then it was like 30 kilowatt, had like simplified procedures, administrative procedures and grid connection procedures, which of course simplifies the implementation of the project. And for ground-mounted PV, the special preparation of special plan was the biggest barrier in Lithuania. In Estonia, moderate barriers have been communicated for PV ground-mounted, and only in grid connection process step. And this was mainly due to the same problems with grid connection as indicated before for onshore wind projects. And in Latvia, ground-mounted PV was not covered among the technologies, as I said at the beginning of
that was one
our
of the
presentation.
questions right away.
Yes.
Do you know? Do you know why?
So Edita is there. She was responsible also for Latvia. So I think the project was conceived like that we had to select technologies which we cover, because we couldn't cover all technologies due to, of course, a time limit and budget limit. And, you know, permitting procedures are quite complicated, and many legal sources describe these permitting procedures. So our logic was that we will cover like 2 to 4 technologies per country. And we based our decision in selecting these technologies on NECPs and technologies which have like the largest potential from the perspective of NECP in contributing to the achievement of national targets, I think. So, and some other also criteria, but this was one of the criteria, for example, and there we had for Latvia in the end the technologies that I showed before. And ground-mounted PV was at that time not among those technologies to be analyzed. Edita, did I forget something? Maybe you can add.
No, everything
on this. Okay. Okay. Great. So for rooftop PV, here you see, for example, a lot of green color, which signalizes that there are mainly no barriers identified for this technology in the countries. And this is mainly also, like I said, that these technologies are often, they have like simplified procedures and are not faced by these barriers as a result, compared to other 2 technologies, onshore and ground-mounted PV. Now I will move to the best practice and policy recommendations, which we identified in our project. So to identify best practice and policy recommendations, we conducted desktop research first in all member states, and we had also technology-specific, mainly workshops, where we also discussed our results, and then it was like validation workshops that we had and collected further input, and also together with the industry, we try to prioritize the best practices we selected in order to identify like the good practices that we selected in order to identify best practices that we would recommend in the countries. And also we conducted per country up to 5 interviews with the stakeholders, like sector representatives, but also some public sector representatives and NGOs who are working in environmental sector to have an objective or input, you know, for our project. So this is how we came to the best practice and policy recommendations, which I will present now. Our research showed that these are the key elements which are important in order to have optimized processes or improved processes, permit granting processes. So first of all, administrative communication and monitoring, guidance and best practice, central provision of information, participation and acceptance, ease procedures for certain projects, clarified priority for renewable energy sources, which already was mentioned by Vera before, and technology-specific recommendations. We had some technology-specific recommendations as well. So these before, these other recommendations I've mentioned, they are cross-technology ones. The first element I've mentioned is administrative procedure, administrative communication, and processes. So here we, as a result of our research, decided that the use of e-communication, including monitoring, eases the work of authorities and also facilitates and speeds up the permitting of projects. It also unifies different application processes and allows monitoring and identification of slow process steps. So to identify the barriers and the bottlenecks and also allows to address these bottlenecks for the projects. One-stop shop, which already was mentioned by Vera. It also showed our results also show that one-stop shop can be designated designed differently. There could be a technology-specific one-stop shop or an optional one. One-stop shops, during our workshops, I have to admit, there were different discussions. Some stakeholders were in favor of one-stop shops, others were more reluctant to having them. So I think it's different per project and per country. You know, those countries with good contacts and where projects are going smoothly, they already have the processes and are happy with the situations, and others of course would be in favor of one-stop shops, to have one contact, you know, to apply and then to receive all the permits. So also the one-stop shops, as I said, can support applicants with the permission of their projects by managing behind the scenes process with other authorities, or it can alternatively be the single permitting authority, where you apply and then you receive the permits. Also, what is important when designing the permitting procedures, to have clear roles and processes. So in some countries, the roles and processes are not clear, which of course hinders the project implementation, where the project developers do not know who is responsible for what and where to start, you know, the process. You know, if you are at the beginning of the process, I know if you implemented like 10 projects already, maybe it's more easy, you know, but it also may be different from municipality to municipality, as we heard from the bigger project developers, and also from country to country, of course, those project developers working in different countries. So clear roles and processes help authorities themselves as well to understand their responsibilities and the way the documents have to be processed. And it's important also to have limited amount of authorities involved and parties involved in order to have efficient processes. And also important to have deadlines, which also our project results show that there are deadlines in many countries. In some countries, there are no deadlines for several processes or process steps. But if there are deadlines, usually they are not kept, which is the bigger problem in the end, you know. So it's also important not to only have these deadlines, but also to have like monitoring in place to ensure that these deadlines are also kept, you know. But this is not the case still in, I think, almost all member states. So here a couple of examples from the countries. I will not go through all of the examples. You know, you can receive the slides after our webinar. I will be happy to send them to LASMA, and you can share them. But also you have the possibility to read in our final project report, which is publicly available. I will also send the link, and you can read a little bit more examples from all the countries, you know, on some good examples. So here, for example, I just want to mention example from Denmark. So here the Danish Energy Agency, DEA, serves as one-stop shop for offshore procedures, for example, and all permitting the decisions are coordinated by this energy agency. She coordinates the process with other authorities, and which are responsible for different offshore interests. And it seems to be by the Danish sector, it's considered as a very effective way of dealing with onshore projects, for example. The next element is guidance and best practice. So this is also very important for the project developers especially, but also for other, sorry, I have to switch it off, but For project developers, it's important to have guidance. It's really helpful in implementing their projects if they know the process steps and everything is clarified, especially when it comes also to impact assessments. It was also highlighted by the interviewees that they perceived the guidance very, very helpful in implementing the projects. And that might be different kind of guidance. So there might be guidance of the EU, which Vera also mentioned that the guidance based on our project results also partly were published last year. Last year, sorry. EU guidance can help members to reach the goals defined, especially in their directives. But national guidelines, for example, for stakeholders, they have to be more specific than the EU guidelines. And as I said, they are helpful if they describe the documents, for example, that are necessary to be submitted and to which authority, and the processes are explained step by step. It's also important to have a monitoring processes because it's not sufficient to just identify the problems, you know, and then do nothing. It's also important to address these barriers. So it's also important to have a monitoring system in order to address the problems as well. So here, for example, we have a good example from Portugal. In Portugal, there is a task force on barriers. And this is a PREN, the Renewable Association in Portugal, which assesses the barriers in permitting, licensing, environmental impact assessment, and grid connection in order to support government entities on measures to tackle these barriers and speed up the permitting processes. So the next element is central provision of information. It's also important to have centralized information because the problem is that in many countries it was complained about the situation that the information is not provided on central manner. For example, especially when it comes to environmental impact assessments, many informations could be centralized and provided online, and this information could be used, you know, from project to project. And the main idea is that the project developers complain that they have each time to collect this specific information separately, and this aggravates the implementation of the processes. So not every information, of course, can be used from project to project, but there are some informations which, of course, could be useful to have centralized and published online. So it is important to have central independent information platforms and then online GIS databases or maps. This, for example, could involve information on restricted areas, information on grid availability, data on general renewable energy potential, etc., etc. Yeah, so here again, some examples. For example, in Germany, National Marine Authority evaluates possible critical sites due to high environmental value. And for planners, this way it is easier than to find sites that do not face objection by the authority from the beginning. The next element is about participation and acceptance measures. I think many countries already acknowledge that it's important to involve also citizens from the beginning of the project, you know, in the discussions about the project, and to talk about the benefits of the project, and to address their concerns from the beginning in order to prevent that the projects are blocked at a later stage. I think many project developers already in the Baltic states, as I know from Lithuania, already used to do that earlier before. So I think this is nothing very new, but in some countries it's still not used in the European Union. So exactly do I miss something to highlight here? Yeah, so participation in general, there are two options of participation, financial participation and non-financial participation. So here, for example, we also have some examples of financial participation, which might be interesting for some countries. For example, in Denmark, there are several financial participation measures in place for wind projects. And this, for example, project planners pay neighbors an annual bonus based on the corresponding capacity of the plant. And this would contribute to a green fund scheme for affected municipalities for onshore wind. Also, they compensate, for example, losses of property value that are larger than 1%. And also citizens living closer than 200 meters from PV plants can sell their property, for example, to the project planners. Or in Luxembourg, there are subsidies for renewable-friendly municipalities, which also seem to work quite well, in order that municipalities are keen in having projects in their area in the end, instead of preventing these projects in their municipality territory. Yeah, so it's also important to have eased procedures for repowering small-scale renewable energy sources and self-supply. This, unfortunately, is still, especially with repowering, this is not the case in the countries. We barely came across some examples here, but small-scale renewable energy sources, to some extent, usually have some reliefs here in the permitting procedures, but also not in all countries. This is the case. So some examples here again. In Germany, for example, there are already some kind of procedures which are easier for repowering of wind projects. So in June last year, Federal Parliament has passed legislation that for permitting procedures for repowering of wind, only in the changes compared to the status quo should be assessed in the environmental impact assessment, and not the whole project again from the beginning. So, which is really a great amendment from the perspective of German wind industry. And I think this also might be implemented in other countries, because many interviewees complained about lack of relief procedures for repowering. So clarified priority for renewable energy project. This is mainly what is already being done, what Vera mentioned at the beginning, that there is already overriding public interest, so that it is important to have this political backing of renewable energy sources, and also this definition of public interest of renewable energy sources. That means that the renewable energy projects have also their benefits, have to be weighted equally in assessment of impacts of these projects compared to other interests, like, for example, a protection of nature, and that these values are weighted equally. And yeah, this was not the case before in the countries. I think it's still not the case in the countries, except that we know that already in Germany, this is the case, that they already defined renewable energy sources as public interest last year. This is still new. We still have no experience from the practical side, how it works in practice, so to say, but this is still already in paper. So it's interesting to see if it really works and brings some good results in practice when implementing the projects, you know. Okay, so here the general recommendations for optimized processes. When designing the permitting procedures, it is really important to provide a clear sequential description of the application processes. It is also important to clearly assign individual responsibilities of authorities, so that everyone knows who's responsible for what and to whom should be applied for which permit. Transparency on required documentation is also crucial. This should be done also, transparency should be achieved or guaranteed for each process step. Deadlines, as I said, is really important issue in the EU countries. So we received a lot of concerns about deadlines either not being set or being set but not being kept, and that the authorities usually ask for additional documents which extends the processes, and this is the way how to obey the deadlines. And also important is to take into account also different technologies or different projects in this case. For example, that different procedures have to be designed for different sizes of projects. This, especially for small scale projects, the procedures should be easier and many steps should be not necessary compared to the bigger projects. Processes should be also to some extent technology specific, and also different procedures should be, or to some extent different procedures of course should be in place for new installations for repowering self-consumption. Yeah, and also very important is of course to have IT infrastructure, or the processes in the EU countries are still to very little extent digitalized with some exceptions. So it is really important to further digitalize the processes in order to speed up the procedures. So this is also one takeaway from our research done in this Resimplify project. So I think this is very briefly, of course, to present our work of a couple last years. So yeah, happy to answer your questions if there are, and even more happy to have discussions with you on further possibilities to improve. Especially, Lina, as you said that it's good on paper, so it's really important now to hear from you what are your suggestions, how to improve them in practice.
Yeah, thanks. Before we open floor for discussion, yeah, once again, I wanted to thank you for the extensive work, and I mean, you presented very well on the activities that should be done, but we all know that each state is a bit, each country, each market is a bit different and specific with different historic backgrounds. And yeah, I mean, and this, I guess this should be sort of the first point where we start discussing on how each state perceives and has done what. But in general, I think you were right when you said that during the past year, a lot has been done, and new things, new rules have been implemented, I think in all three Baltic states, and it would be good definitely to update the report, the result, and also include definitely ground-mounted solar, because it has increased in its importance in Latvia. Definitely, it is one of the most important technologies that would drive Latvia to green transition, I would say, along with wind. But yeah, and that was kind of the very first question / comment from Alnis, and then we had somebody asking whether the presentation would be shared, but you already did say that it would.
Yeah.
So I will send it afterwards. And yeah, and then we have the hand. Oh no, sorry. Before Linus, there was also another question / comment regarding the one-stop shops, and somebody asked how realistic it is to implement them, given that at least in Latvia the different institutions are coordinated by different ministries, so it's not really like under one ministry and each is doing something else, and the horizontal sort of liaison is very, very vague.
So I think that, as I said, also that one-stop shop is, there are different ways of implementing it. It might be one institution, you know, who is responsible for everything. There are some countries like having one-stop shops for different, like several process steps combined in one, you know, institution, which is responsible for several process steps. There are, for example, like this Danish Energy Agency is a one-stop shop for offshore projects. I think this is possible to do in Baltic states. Offshore is still on the way, I think. So, for example, here, if the processes are still unclear, maybe here is still the chance to work with one-stop shop, you know, for offshore projects, for example. But this is also, you know, the idea that it might be also one authority which is responsible for the coordination with other competent authorities. Like you said, there are many ministries that you apply to one ministry, for example, and then she coordinates the rest of the process, so that you, as a project developer, I think the idea would be that you come to one authority, apply, and then you go out with the permission for the whole process, you know, for the project, sorry. If it's feasible, to which extent is feasible? I know from my past, I was working in Lithuania very long ago at the municipality level as a lawyer, and I know that for spatial planning, Linus, tell me if it's still the case or not. For spatial planning, you applied at the municipality, and then the municipality coordinated all the steps, you know, and you then received the approval, for example, for spatial planning. So this is something like kind of one-stop shop for spatial planning in Lithuania, I would say, for example.
Lauris turned on his camera. I don't know. Did you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you, Lasma. Thank you, Jurga. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on the question, because I think what Jurga explained would be a very good solution in theory, and it could work as a formal entity. But I really see the fundamental problem with the political will, because as long as the ministries, you know, are organized by different political powers and they have different interests, I think it's really hard to have them fundamentally aligned, to have a really functional one-stop shop with environmental permitting, with access to grid, and with everything. So I just think that if there's no very, very strong pressure from the EU that it must be implemented, I'm very skeptical that it can fly, even though I would really love for that to happen.
Yeah, so I think as you see that, for example, from my presentation, we didn't give you like policy recommendations that you have to do or implement all these elements that have been presented. So therefore, we understand that each country is different, and therefore, you know, after we had this extensive number of interviews with the representatives in each of the EU country, so we went for these elements, you know, which are more or less general and important to have in the optimized processes. But of course, you cannot have like one rule for each EU country, you know, the same rules for every country, because, as I said, even in the same country, we experienced that some project developers already have, you know, they implemented many projects. They are already good in communicating with all these involved authorities, ministries, municipalities, I don't know. And then if processes go well, and from their perspective, everything is functioning well with all these authorities set, if you have especially these guidelines, for example, in place, and it's quite clear who is responsible for what and whom to apply to, and all these processes are working well. So maybe you don't have to implement this one-stop shop, you know, just to implement it, you know. So the main idea is to take the elements from those countries that we identified, that they think that this element is working very well in this country, and to look, okay, should we implement this one in our country because it would improve the process? or it's working already somehow, or it's not working for our context. So it's like a puzzle, you know, to take these things which you think, in this country it works very well, so it's interesting, it might work also in our country. So we take it maybe and try to implement as well, you know. So this was the idea of the project, you know, because we understand that there is no fit for all countries model in this case, and we cannot implement like a harmonized model of permitting procedure for all EU countries.
Vera, did you want to reflect on this as well?
Yes, I wanted to add on this. Of course, I agree there are different ways to implement one-stop shops, and different solutions may work in different countries. I think the idea that one authority is really responsible for everything is probably a dream. But what I would see as more realistic is the coordination function, that one authority is really the contact point in the real sense of the term, and then coordinates with the other authorities who have their competences and interests, and that's normal. But it can lead to a more harmonized process flow, to have one authority that can tell you, now your application is with this authority and it will take that much time to get a reply, and that also helps the authorities to get their house in order, so to speak. So I think that is what we are seeking.
Right. Linus, now the floor is yours, but also there's a question to you from European Energy. They're asking for your explanation on how the one-stop shop is working, and supposedly this one-stop shop as such is claimed to be there by LeadGrid. So your question and then comment, answer to this question.
So I will start from answer, but one-stop shop in LeadGrid. So in simple word, you applying for something in LeadGrid and you stopped. That's one stop shop. so that's well. Funny, but that's real life. In LeadGrid, you are like in the swamp. They do not have regulation on timing, and if they do, they using documents and claiming documents are not right, and you are submitting it 10 times, and you are wasting time. So this is one-stop shop with LeadGrid. Unfortunately, it is one, but it is stopped. So I would like to say that your presentation is more or less okay by my view. So I have comments about electricity production licenses. You lighted them with the green, but say in Lithuania, I know some projects which are waiting for license from March 2022 until now. I will address this problem this way, that when we changing legislation, it appears that with the goodwill of change of legislation, we are doing harm for all the market, because if legislation is changed, say 2022 January, well, we will have a possibility to use it just in 2024 in full extent, because of the law is produced in 22, and all the supporting legal acts will come in 2 years. So I suggest that you take this into account, monitoring of legislation change and frequency. So well that's unfortunately happened in Lithuania that legislation changed for the goodwill of politicians in 2022 June, but at the same time everything stopped. Developments are stopped because of that legislation and lack of future documents, how to implement and how to follow it. So this is main observation of myself and the market, that for politicians, please do not change legislation so often. If it is done on yearly basis, then we cannot follow new legislation, because our projects are say 4, 5, sometimes 10 years in the period, and in that time legislation changes 4, 5, 6 times, and what to follow. So this is main reason, and from this all the problems are arising. Litgrid is a different topic. This is a state-owned company, and they have own regulation, but everything is starting from too many changes in the legal framework. So that's my observation. And when you are producing the overview for European Commission, I please to reflect these legislation changes. So shortly from my side, I hope I answered European Energy one-stop shop with Litgrid.
Okay, so very interesting one-stop shop example from Lithuania, I think. Yeah, I think this is not the meaning that it stops, you know, when you apply, not the meaning of one-stop shop, what the European Commission and our project suggested. But of course, I have this from Lithuania from past years when we had the interviews, that this permanently changing legal environment is like, yeah, that the industry complained that they have no security and you know, of planning, then which hinders the market. This is correct, but I think where to find the balance is important. Then, you know, that on the one side, you know, if something is not working, you still would like to change, you know, that it works better, you know, but not to change just to change, as you said before, you know, on the paper to have something, but then, you know, it doesn't bring anything, then it's also not the solution, you know. But yeah, how to find, you know, the balance, you know, and really identify the problems where something has to be changed, but then maybe then change, you know, I don't know how to address this issue, but I understand the perspective, of course, you know, that.
Yes, but I want to stress that if we will take action now, it will be implemented 2 years from now. So effect will be 2 years from now. If we want to act fast, then we do not need to change regulation which is in place now. We should apply different thinking of the projects and say overriding public interest. So that's very good words, but imagine politician which has elections next year and overriding public interest. So he will be never elected once more if he will implement it, and that's reality. So
therefore, it's one of the things is that it's important to have these strategies. I don't know, for example, usually they have national targets, you know, and these national targets are just national targets, but therefore it's important also, what was also shown on my slide, but I then went through each bullet point. Of course, you can read this afterwards because then we wouldn't have any time for discussions, unfortunately, which is the most important part, for this event, that we exchange and look together for solutions and ideas. That, for example, the strategies setting the national targets should also set the targets for the regional and local level, so that it's not, that national target has to be achieved, but the local level, for example, which is also, usually the projects are implemented in the municipalities, and local governments are responsible for these projects as well, but if they are not responsible to contributing, to the national targets, so they don't care. As I said, local community is against maybe the project, and then I don't want to be unpopular, and then I would rather like prevent this project so that people are in our territory happy, But if they have also like binding targets on the local level, that might be also a change, that they understand that they have also to contribute to climate and energy targets,
Yeah, I agree fully. And sometimes municipalities, for no reason, block the EAAs. So just own will and no reason. So having this process transparent, say what reasons you can use to block activities. So then we can monitor this, and you do not have a right to block, or you do have one. So, but yes, but you pointed out that if all processes will be monitored, say, by one authority, which is not, say, taking actions, but it is more monitoring. Some kind of monitoring entity who is responsible for the providing guidance for politicians would be helpful. But I am pointing out once more, it is if we will implement it now, it will be available in full extent just 2 years later. That's reality.
Yes, but still, in 2 years later, if it's improvement, it's still some kind of result that we want to achieve. That of course it should be faster, because we are talking about implementing and achieving targets much faster, and it's not optimal, but still better than nothing, I think. And also, like you said, this monitoring also, I think also digitalization. If you have many things online that everyone can check, for example, I don't remember in which country, but there is also the possibility to track, the process, the status quo, the process online all the time. So I think also this would create a little bit of transparency, that you see where the authority is with the implementation, why it stops right now, and everything. So I think many elements can bring to the result that we want to have. It's not just monitoring, but monitoring as well. And these. For example, that you say that municipalities maybe also do not understand sometimes the importance of these renewable energy projects still, although we have this renewable energy already since I don't know how many decades now, most probably. Maybe also to have one of the important highlights that we have to organize still some kind of trainings for the municipalities, so that they understand the importance of these projects on the one side, but on the other side also to do trainings to them how to implement these projects, from their perspective, because one of the problems was still, unfortunately, that in some municipalities, especially in those who deal less with renewable energy projects still, that there is a lack of expertise, experience, with these projects. So sometimes it stops because they don't know maybe how to deal with these projects, sometimes in some countries.
Yeah, do not agree with
sorry,
yeah.
Can I jump in because we have other hands raised? And I mean, but that is a very valid discussion you're having there. And Jurga, fully support you and the European Commission on doing trainings or providing some sort of information education to the municipalities. I think that at least in Latvia, we still feel that each municipality has a different understanding of what renewable projects mean and why they would be needed. Quick reflection also on the legislation processes. They happen slowly, I think, in most of the countries, also in Latvia. And we as the industry definitely advocate for quality rather than speed, because we've had in the past experience where pieces of draft legislations have been tried to be implemented very quickly and the turnout is just like horrific. But strategies, renewable strategies, national level strategies are much needed. Latvia doesn't have one, and there should be clear ideas on what targets, by when, which technologies. That would help tremendously. That's a quick reflection from my side, and we've got Alnis patiently waiting with his hand up for a long time now. Alnis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the Baltic Wind associations of organizing this event, and really this mapping report is very nice report having it here. I represent the European energy company which is active in wind and in PV, and in addition to that, I am also head of the Latvian PV association just recently established, so I can talk on behalf of the both organizations in a way. So my question regarding this very well mapping report, will that end only up on the desk of the European Commission, or will that be also disseminated in member states and relevant ministries will be engaged in discussions on addressing these issues which you have spotted? So that's one question. The other question and remark which comes from the experience on PV side, since the wind is not yet that far in development in Latvia, and it seems the PV probably will be much faster given the simplicity how to deploy it and develop. So we, for example, are facing the issues not only with municipalities, but we are facing the issues with the state-owned companies. And here is not the distribution network or system or transmission system operator. We are facing the issues with the Latvian state forest company, which is actually blocking development of the projects. So there are cases where they are actually not providing the way leaves for cables, and we are just wondering, really, is this company working along the Latvian energy strategy policy? And as the last one already indicated, we don't have such one in Latvia. So therefore, my question is whether you looked also beyond the system operators, the other companies which may affect the development of the projects. Thank you.
So thank you for the question. So I think for the first question, we had these results as well. Like Vera said at the beginning, you can add afterwards, Vera, if you want. So this project already had the aim of identifying the problems and good practices in order to inform the Commission about the situation in the countries, and also to feed to some extent the policy making. For example, this guidance which Vera mentioned are also to some extent based on the results of our project. So this is, not just doing the project, and also a big part of the project is also these events like we have today to discuss, also the good practices, so to trigger further improvements in the countries as well. So to some events, also public sector representatives participate. if they implement something, you know, we have no power to ensure that it happens, of course, but it depends, of course, on the willingness in the end, to some extent, of the countries themselves, you know, to implement some things in order to improve the situation for the projects. But the aim of the project is, of course, to contribute to this with the results in this case. And I didn't. So concerning the second question, we had interviews. I don't know if this is the correct way I understand the question, but we had discussions during the interviews, not only with the sector representatives, I mean wind or PV sector representatives, but also to other stakeholders relevant for the project implementations. But I don't know to which extent, for example, forestry authorities representing forestry have been interviewed. I have to check. I cannot say right now. But we try, the aim of our research, we usually try to bring all perspectives, you know, together. We didn't interview just representatives from the renewable sector. We also try to interview representatives from also the public authorities and also from environmental organizations. So those who are with their perspectives to some extent involved, you know, in the project implementation, also to reflect also their views, because of course environmental organization would have different perspective on the projects than wind energy association or industry, you know. So we wanted to have like an objective view on the problems in the countries, and also hear from both sides what are the good practices, for example, which was interesting also to hear from some environmental organizations that they say themselves that some rules are too strict, you know, from the environmental perspective, you know, in the environmental impact assessments, even when projects have to be approved. So usually we would expect that it would say, no, everything is fine, you know, they have to be strict, but to some extent they also in some countries admitted that, yeah, maybe they are too strict. So, but yeah, I don't know. I hope I answered your questions.
Alms, do you want to have a quick reflection or elaborate a bit more? What's the role of the Latvian state forestry, state forest utility in this whole situation?
Well, it's very, very simple, very straightforward. So you have to get the cable through the state forest to get connected to the grid. And you cannot get that through the Latvian state forest because they're simply rejecting on undefined reasons. So, and then we are wondering, the state-owned company managing the state assets actually working against the state policy of deploying and development of renewables. So the wind association probably and the wind developers are not yet facing, because in Latvia we are not that far away, or the projects are not that far away facing this problem, and therefore I raise this issue. This is more relevant for the countries which got substantial areas of the forest. So it's Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Scandinavia. They are probably at lesser extent in Lithuania, but here it might become actually the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And regarding the politicians, I really would appreciate that this report would end up on the Prime Minister's desk or the relevant ministry's desk, so that we can talk to them and pinpoint that actually, say for example, Latvia is a red spot just looking in this report. So we have reasons to talk and elaborate on the policy and strategy. Thank you.
Yeah, it gives I support and agree. The report gives a kind of good visual image of where Latvia is at. I mean, you see there are several red spots, red dots there, and how does it compare to other EU countries? But yeah, I mean, coming back to the state forest company, sure. I mean, as the wind energy association, we face the issue as well, but it's a bit different issue. but exactly what Alan said, half of Latvia is covered with forests, and half of that half belongs to the state forest company. And of course, it's an interesting area where wind farms could potentially be developed. But then, the state forest company has its own policy. It's a state utility, and they probably are, well, they are managed by certain political parties, and it all comes down to what ministry manages what, and what the political interests are, and how, and this ends up how, in the ways that how the actual policy is shaped in general in at least in Latvia. Yeah, Vera.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to add on the first question on the follow-up to the study. So as Jurga said, it was an important input for our recommendation and the guidance already in May last year. We also had a public consultation and several meetings, a conference. But now we don't want this recommendation just to be a paper, of course. So we are creating an expert group with representatives of the member states to really monitor what is being done, keep track of the progress, and continue to learn from each other. And you mentioned the prime ministers. It was a request from the prime ministers to come up with the emergency regulation. So this really has political momentum now, and we have to use it, to be frank.
And I think the problem is that, of course, there are many interests. It's not only renewable energy sources, but nature protection, military security, national security. So it's all about balancing these interests, and of course it's up on the highest level in the country, to decide how to put these interests together, which is important, and how to achieve, for example, these goals, by balancing all these interests, the best way it's possible. It's of course we cannot say that nature protection is not important. Nobody says that, but how to balance these interests, this is what's important. And usually, as you said, of course, each ministry has own perspective, and sometimes it doesn't fit together, that the policies are not coordinated to the extent needed.
Yeah, thank you. We have a comment that the Prime Minister should have been invited to this webinar. Well, I must say that the invitation went out to the responsible ministry, which is the Climate and Energy Ministry. I hope somebody from the ministry is in fact represented in this webinar, but also good news is that the President's office is here as well. So we hope that the message goes to the most important authorities in Latvia. Yeah, somebody else. Are there any questions, comments, reflections on what has been discussed before? I do not see any hands or Linus.
Yes, so the question to representatives of European Commission. Are you planning, publish this report, when it will be ready, and do some kind of publicity on it? Because as I see that those documents are published just on European Commission webpage, and that's all. But really will be important to gather all the policy makers, so ministries, prime ministers, and do the presentation for them. So from my side, I invited 2 ministries and commission. So I see the commission representative are here, but ministries are not attending. So maybe European Commission have the initiative to present these findings and force governments to sit together and to do their job. So, well, that's my question and my wish that it will be happening.
Yes, I can. So we already published the intermediate report from the Resimplify project also in May last year, and we did publicity. Yeah, the means we have, social media, our website, and so on. And we will also publish the final report, of course, once it is ready.
Yes, but I am saying that together ministries and parliaments, or not parliaments, governments to attend, because I being in this association for quite a long time, I do not feel that government is using this document. So maybe some persons are using, but ministers and prime ministers, I not sure they are aware.
I think we published in May, and we informed our stakeholder network, I remember, and we also organized all these events. We were like today invite at least the representatives from the responsible ministries. You know, of course, nobody can force them to participate, you know, but we invite them and try to have discussions also with them. We will have also 2 final sectoral events. I have to check with the European Solar Power Europe and Wind Europe associations, which are also partners in this project, and they will organize 2 events for their members. So not only member associations, but also most probably somebody from public sector will be definitely invited, at least, you know, and yeah, so let's hope that they will participate there, and we can have these discussions. If they implement these things or just read, you know, you cannot be sure in the end, unfortunately. So I think it's always about, like we learned from our past projects, that it's always about proactive politicians who are in favor of renewables. Usually there things happen more fast and easier if we have like proactive politicians, but if they are reluctant politicians, of course, also our study will not help most probably to change things, you know. But like Vera said, I know that there is like one again, like project tender about these expert groups. Yeah, so I think there will be like 3 expert groups also on permitting procedure improvements. So their further discussions will be ongoing and monitored, and the exchanges will happen there in this new project, as far as I understand, you know. But I think this one was mentioned by you there, so is still open as far as I know, the tender. But this is the continuation, so to say, of our project, that the work will be continued and not stop with this project, of course.
Yes, to add on this, maybe the expert group will have a broad focus, like the Resimplify study, but we already started the dialogue with member states on one aspect, the process-related barriers, in the framework of the Single Market Enforcement Task Force. And so member states have been made aware of all the process-related barriers identified in the study, and they analyze them, see if they agree, and which ones they can agree to tackle. And we already see some good results. Member states are starting to work on it.
Okay, I don't see any other comments or questions, don't see any hands. I think this, I mean, it was very insightful with a lot of takeaways, I think, for both sides, the EU Commission and you know, the national state representative stakeholders. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I hope for some sort of continuity on this, that we can still discuss and present to the policymakers the outcomes and the outcome. And yeah, I mean, this is it from my side. Definitely big thank you to all of you, to those who presented, and also those who listened and asked questions. And yeah, let's work together to reach the good result and to have more renewables in place.
Yes, thank you also from my side. Very interesting discussions and valuable input. It was really nice to exchange with you. Thank you very much. Yeah. And I will forward the link to the reports to Lasma, and maybe Lasma, you can share this and presentation as well.
I will share with everybody. Okay. Yes, very good, very good. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, all.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.